I never thought my life would end like this, told through whispers, rumors, and the smirks of people who thought they knew me. But if you are here listening, it means my voice still matters. My name was Jolie. I was a woman, a wife, and for too long I let myself believe I was loved. What I didn't know was that my marriage, the one I clung to with fragile hope, was nothing but a stage for betrayal. I was only 25 when I met him. He was older, handsome, and charming in a way that made the room tilt when he walked in. To a girl who had just inherited her father's fortune after his untimely death, he seemed like an anchor in a storm. My relatives had circled me like vultures, then all wanting a piece of what my father left behind. But he looked at me like I was more than money. At least that's what I told myself. When he proposed, I said yes without hesitation. I thought I had found my protector, my partner, someone who would stand with me against a world that only saw me as a bank account. What I didn't realize was that he saw me the same way. I was never his beloved wife, I was his investment. The first years of marriage were sweet in a way that now feels like poison dripping with honey. He took me to dinners, kissed my forehead, told me I was beautiful. But slowly, the cracks began to show. Late nights at the office that smelled of perfume not mine. Business trips that stretched longer than the calendar allowed. The first time I confronted him, he laughed and pulled me close, whispering that I was imagining things, that stress was making me paranoid. I wanted to believe him so badly that I swallowed my doubt. Then came the diagnosis: cancer. Stage 3 at first, then stage 4. It was like someone had pulled the floor out from under me. Suddenly my days were measured in hospital visits, chemotherapy sessions, and the bitter taste of medicine on my tongue. I remember the sterile white of hospital walls, the sting of needles, the way my body withered in the mirror until I barely recognized myself. And him. My husband, the man who vowed to love me in sickness and in health. He played his part well in front of others. He held my hand during doctor's visits, posted pictures on social media about supporting my brave wife, but behind closed doors he was already gone. I would hear him in the next room whispering on the phone, his voice soft in ways it hadn't been with me for years. Sometimes I caught the scent of another woman's perfume clinging to his shirt when he thought I was too weak to notice. The cruelest part wasn't just that he cheated, it was that he waited for me to die. I could see it in his eyes when he thought I was asleep, calculating, patient like a man counting down the days to his inheritance. My life became a slow march toward death, and for him it was a march toward wealth and freedom. But I wasn't as weak as he thought. My godfather had always distrusted him. From the beginning, he had forced us to sign a prenuptial agreement, a document that tied my fortune not to my husband, but to my choices. At the time, I thought it unnecessary, even cruel. He loves me, I had insisted, but my godfather had only looked at me with tired eyes and said, "Then he won't mind signing." That paper would later become my shield, the one thing standing between my husband and everything he craved. As my body weakened, my mind sharpened. Pain has a way of carving you open, of forcing you to see the truth in stark light. I began to write. Not letters of love, but letters of clarity, my will, my instructions, my secrets. Every night when he left the house for his meetings, I wrote by the faint glow of a lamp, pouring into words the revenge I would never see with my own eyes, but that I knew would one day bloom. I also made another choice, one he would never expect. I preserved my eggs before the cancer consumed me entirely. I confided in my best friend, a woman I trusted more than anyone left in this world, and together we created a plan. Through surrogacy, I would have the child he never knew, about a son who would inherit not just my wealth, but my defiance. My baby would be the proof that even as death claimed me, I was not powerless. I carried this secret like a candle in a dark cave. It gave me strength on the nights when my body shook from pain, when my hair fell in clumps, when I felt less like a woman and more like a ghost in waiting. My husband would sit at the edge of the bed, scrolling his phone, while I cried quietly into the pillow. He never asked if I was okay. He was too busy dreaming of a life without me. What he didn't know was that I was dreaming too. dreaming of the day he would stand in the lawyer's office with his mistress by his side, smug and certain only to watch everything slip through his fingers. Dreaming of the moment my godfather would read my words aloud. To my lawful husband, I leave nothing. Dreaming of his face draining of color as he realized the woman he underestimated had beaten him even in death. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For now, all you need to know is that as I lay dying, I wasn't just fading away. I was preparing for a reckoning he would never see coming. The months that followed became a geography of corridors and waiting rooms, a map I could navigate blindfolded. I learned the rhythm of beeping monitors, the antiseptic hum that clung to my clothes. I learned the small practical ways strangers comfort each other in places where pain is common, a nurse warming my hands before an IV, an orderly whispering a joke that didn't ask me to laugh. I learned how to cradle my own fear at 3 in the morning when the world felt emptied of color. Grief hollowed me, but it also carved out a space where clarity could sit. Even as my body dimmed, my mind sharpened into something diamond hard. My godfather, the man my father chose when I was a child to stand in his place, if he ever couldn't started arriving at the hospital without announcing himself. He brought real food wrapped in foil, old photos he knew would make me smile in silence, when silence was the kindest thing. He never asked if I was staying positive. He didn't try to sell me hope I couldn't afford. He simply sat. On the days he spoke, it wasn't small talk. It was things like, "Have you reviewed the medical power of attorney, and did he try to get you to put him on your accounts?" And then once, very softly, "I'm sorry I didn't push harder about him back then. I wanted you to have love without suspicion. I forgot that love without clarity is a trap." The prenup he insisted on before my wedding lived in a plain manila folder inside his briefcase, never far from reach. He placed it on the tray table one afternoon as the sky outside the window poured rain. "People think contracts kill romance," he said, tapping the tab. "They don't. They keep predators honest and the honest protected. Remember that." Within those pages was the architecture of my salvation, my inheritance ring-fenced to trusts in my name only. A clause requiring a will to vest any spousal benefits. A provision granting my godfather temporary guardianship over my estate if I became incapacitated. At 25, I had rolled my eyes at all the legalese and signed because I was in love and wanted the discomfort to end. Now at 32, pale and bald under a hospital cap, I thanked the version of me who had been too naive to understand, but smart enough to listen. My husband performed devotion like a man training for a role. He arrived in crisp shirts, carrying flowers he handed to nurses. Not me. He learned which doctors liked to be flattered, and how loudly to sigh at billing to look burdened. He posed us for selfies, my face swollen from steroids, his jaw carved by gym lighting discipline. He captioned the posts with words like warrior and faith and forever. At night when he thought I slept, his phone glowed in the dark like a secret. I would smell perfume clinging to his sleeves that wasn't mine, a floral with sugar undertones that made my nausea spike. Sometimes I thought I heard a laugh in the hallway that didn't belong to any nurse. I tried once half-heartedly to ask him. He bent to kiss my forehead and said I needed rest. Said paranoia was a side effect. Said the word sweetheart like a command. I turned my face to the window and memorized the shape of a bare branch scratching the glass, while my chest learned the particular ache of disbelief turning into recognition. That ache became my companion. It came with me to radiation. It sat with me during infusion as cold crawled up my arm. It walked me back to bed when the world tilted too sharply. That was when the plan stopped being an idea that lived in the back of a drawer and became a clock I wound each night. My best friend Mara was the person I called when I had to say the truth without trimming it into something polite. We had stood in each other's lives for a decade, cheap apartments, and shared noodles, tiny victories the time she picked me up at 2 a.m., when my car died, and I cried from shame at needing help. She did not like my husband. It wasn't a moral objection as much as a bodily one, the way a person recoils when a room smells slightly of rot. When I told her what I wanted to do, she didn't blink. "We'll find the right clinic," she said. "We'll find the right woman. And we will keep your secret like a seed in winter." Preserving my eggs felt like an act of defiance so tender it made me shake. The clinic was quiet, soft-voiced, efficient. I signed forms with a hand that trembled and tried not to imagine a future I might not see. Science became a bridge where my hope could walk without falling through. Mara sat beside me during consults, a human anchor asking the questions I was too tired to form. My godfather handled the retainer and the trust that would fund everything. When I apologized for the expense, he squeezed my fingers. "Your father would have told me to sell my house if it meant protecting your choice," he said. "I won't need to." We found a surrogate who laughed with her whole face and spoke about her children like they were the best thing she had ever done. We met in a coffee shop with a flickering neon sign. She held my gaze when we discussed terms, and held my hand when we discussed the parts that made me cry. What if I die before he is born? What if something goes wrong? What if? The medical team became a constellation of names I whispered at night like a litany: embryologist, counselor, attorney. In that strange, sacred triangle, surrogate, friend, guardian, we built a space where I could place a life beyond the reach of the man waiting for my death to gift him a windfall. I wrote my will in layers. The first draft was 2 clean numbers and names, percentages, and provisions. The second draft had sentences that sounded like a courtroom speech. The third sounded like begging. I threw it away. The fourth found the voice I needed: firm, tender, precise. I named my godfather as executor and guardian over any child of mine until that child turned 25. I named Mara as the person to make decisions about my son's education and medical care if my godfather passed. I placed every liquid asset and property into trusts, with instructions that required 2 signatures from 2 different people, for any major transaction, neither of whom could be my husband. Then I wrote the sentence I had rehearsed in my head since the first night I smelled someone else on his shirt. To my lawful husband I deny the inheritance. I expected to feel vindication. Instead, I felt grief. Not for him, but for the girl I had been, who wanted so badly to be cherished that she mistook consumption for love. I cried for her for a long time. Then I folded the paper and handed it to my godfather without ceremony. He took it in both hands like a priest receiving a confession and said nothing, which was the most merciful thing he could have done. There were practicalities, so many practicalities. Bank accounts retitled, passwords changed, safety deposit boxes opened, cataloged, resealed, a key given to Mara, a list of names given to my godfather, a letter addressed to my future son, written in the language of a woman trying to hold him she would never meet. I described the things I hoped he would love: books that smell like dust and summer quiet animals, the way streetlights make puddles look like coins. I told him what I had learned too late: that attention is not love, that charm is not care, that the right person will not ask you to disappear to make their light brighter. I told him, if he ever doubted his worth, to call the man I called father after mine died, and the woman I called sister, though we were born to different mothers. I sealed the letter and pressed my mouth to it, embarrassed by the superstition and unwilling to skip it, as if love could leak through paper and find him. Evidence collected itself around me without my trying. Hotel charges on shared statements, duplicates of receipts. He tried to erase a lipstick mark on the inside of a collar that no cleaning could fully coax away. A neighbor mentioned a woman with red hair leaving my house at noon while I was inpatient. The nurse who had been with me through my worst chemo days saw him kissing someone in the parking garage and told me with tears in her eyes, like she was betraying a professional code. I wasn't surprised. I was tired. When he suggested we meet with our lawyer to get ahead of estate planning, my bones went cold. Soon I told him, when I'm a little stronger. I thought of him practicing his bereaved face. I thought of the way he would casually hold the other woman's hand under a table he thought hid everything. I thought of my godfather straightening his tie before reading my words aloud. I thought of my son not yet born, and the soft weight of a body that breathes because you insisted on his right to exist. I lived for that future like sailors live for a lighthouse they can't see, but trust is there. On my better days, with color in my cheeks and a scarf wrapped over my bare head, I sat at the window and counted the pigeons on the ledge like they were votes in a private election. If I got to 10 before one flew away, I allowed myself to imagine the sound of my baby's laugh. If I got to 20, I imagined the shape of his hands, whether he would have my father's square fingers or my mother's delicate wrists. On the days when pain nested under my ribs and refused to be reasoned with, I repeated names my godfather who had always seen me. Mara, who would be my son's map. The surrogate whose body would do for me what mine could not. My doctor who told me the truth without metaphors. The litany kept me from drowning. A week before the transfer, he brought flowers the color of fresh wounds and placed them on the windowsill where the sun would bake them into a smell that made my stomach turn. He took photos of them and posted a caption about hope. When he left, I carried the bouquet to the bathroom, cut the stems, and slid them gently into the trash. It felt like practice for letting things go without apology. There is a peace that comes when a plan finally stops being a plan and becomes a sequence step, 1 step 2, step 3. The transfer was scheduled, the funds were wired, the will was filed with my attorney lodged where no hands but the right ones could reach it. The prenup slept like a guard dog under my godfather's watch. I started writing shorter letters, then instructions for my funeral, simple. No lilies for my house, sell it. Buy a smaller place for Mara to raise him until the trust buys them a home for my jewelry. Keep one piece. Give the rest to charity, for my husband none. I wrote a final list titled, Things That Mattered, and it was embarrassingly ordinary. A certain cinnamon roll from a bakery on 6th, the first time my father let me steer the car in an empty lot the way my mother hummed when she sewed the night Mara and I drank cheap wine on the floor and decided we were enough even if the world said otherwise. I waited for fear to return with its claws out. It didn't. It watched from the doorway like it knew there was no room left for it. The day the clinic called to confirm the heartbeat, my chest cracked open with a feeling I hadn't had since before the diagnosis. Joy that did not apologize for itself. I pressed the phone to my ear and cried without sound, because sound felt too small. When I told my godfather, he put his head in his hands and wept like a man who had been holding up a roof too long, and finally felt another set of hands arrive to help. The last time my husband tried to kiss me, I turned my head and he let his lips land on my temple. He didn't ask why. He had stopped asking me anything months ago. He stood, checked his watch, and left to pick up dinner, returning hours later with a bag that smelled like someone else's house. I ate the dry rice anyway because my body needed fuel to build a future without him. I want to tell you I forgave him then, to be neat and noble, but forgiveness is not a trophy you award yourself for good behavior. I didn't forgive him. I did something quieter and to me holier. I removed him from the center of my life without telling him. I moved everything that mattered to a place he couldn't reach. I became small where he looked, and large where he refused to look at all. Soon there would be a funeral. Soon there would be a law office with leather chairs and a bowl of candies no one touches. Soon there would be a woman with red hair holding his hand under the table. Soon there would be my godfather clearing his throat, unfolding paper. Soon there would be the sentence I wrote late at night with my heart beating like a drum in a faraway parade. But before all of that, there was this me alive deciding. And I want you to know deciding is a kind of living. Time shifted strangely once I accepted the truth that my body would not carry me far. Hours stretched when the pain was heavy, then snapped shut without warning when a good moment flickered through. I began to measure life less by calendars and more by the things I could still do. Write another page, sip soup without nausea, whisper to my unborn son in the dark. Every evening when my husband left with his usual excuse, business dinner, urgent meeting, conference call, I lit the lamp by my bed and wrote. Sometimes I wrote letters to my godfather, thanking him for being my shield. To Mara, asking her to teach my son kindness without weakness. To the boy himself, promising he was wanted even if he would never see my face. Other nights, I wrote instructions so specific they bordered on obsessive, which charity should auction my jewelry, which books to keep, which photographs to destroy, so he could not rewrite my story into something convenient for him. The will grew longer, not shorter. It was not just about money, it was about my voice reaching past the grave. I made sure to include the sentence that had become my anchor: "To my lawful husband, I leave nothing." I copied it out 3 times, signed each, sealed them separately. I imagined the look on his face when those words were read aloud, and though it felt like poison to picture him, I held on to that image. It gave me strength. Meanwhile, the secret grew quietly. The surrogate's pregnancy advanced while the world believed I was fading without legacy. Mara sent me updates, tiny heartbeat images, recordings of muffled thumps that sounded like distant drums. I would close my eyes and press the phone to my ear, tears slipping down my cheeks, whispering, "I love you," to the child who could not hear me yet. That heartbeat became my rebellion. My husband thought he was waiting for my funeral to inherit. In truth, I was waiting for my son to inherit everything he could never take away. Sometimes fear visited me, whispering cruel possibilities. What if my husband discovered the plan? What if he tried to claim my child as his? Those nights I called Mara, or my godfather, their voices steady anchors in my storm. "He will never touch what isn't his." My godfather promised. "Your boy is protected." I believed him because believing him was the only way I could sleep. My husband grew bolder as my body weakened. He brought his mistress to social events, whispering excuses into the ears of friends who looked the other way. At home, he acted impatient, restless, as if every breath I drew was an inconvenience delaying his new life. I learned to meet his coldness with silence. I saved my words for the pages that mattered, for the people who would honor them. On one of my last good days, I sat in the garden with Mara, the autumn sun warming my fragile skin. I asked her to promise me something. "When he learns the truth, when he loses everything, don't hate him on my behalf. Let him destroy himself. That will be enough." She squeezed my hand, eyes wet but fierce. "I promise. Your revenge is already written." In the final weeks, the house became a theater of hypocrisy. My husband staged his grief early, sighing dramatically when visitors came, draping himself beside my bed for photographs. He spoke of our journey as if he had walked any of it with me. I turned my face to the wall, thinking only of the moment when his mask would crumble in the lawyer's office, when his mistress's painted smile would falter. The night before I died, I finished my last letter. It was not to my husband nor to my friends. It was to my son. I told him that betrayal had broken me, but had also shown me the strength I never knew I had. I told him that revenge is not about cruelty, it is about reclaiming your dignity when others try to strip it away. I ended with the words, "My darling boy, you are the reason I leave this world with hope. Live in truth, live in light, and never let anyone convince you that you are less than enough." I sealed it, pressed it into my godfather's hands, and whispered, "Make sure he knows me." He nodded, unable to speak, and for the first time in years I felt at peace. My husband thought my story ended the moment I closed my eyes. He thought the funeral was the final act, the inheritance his curtain call. He had no idea that my story was only beginning. Funerals are supposed to be endings, but mine was only the prologue. I imagined it from afar, not in the church pews or the graveside, but in the hushed whispers and the glances people exchanged. My husband wore black tailored to perfection, his mistress in subtle pearls, each playing their part, as if grief were a costume. He shook hands with mourners, received condolences with a bowed head, and shed tears that looked real enough to fool the world. Only those who truly knew us would notice the hollowness in his eyes, the way his hand clutched hers a little too tightly, as though eager for what came next. And what came next was the lawyer's office. The day after my burial, he walked into that room with her on his arm. I pictured it so many times while alive that it felt like déjà vu. The mahogany table, the leather chairs, the air faint with old books and polished wood. My godfather was already there, face grim, Mara beside him with her spine straight as a blade. The lawyer shuffled the stack of papers before him, glasses low on his nose. My husband sat down like a king, ready to receive his crown. His mistress crossed her legs and smiled, a silent claim on wealth not yet hers but close enough to taste. He didn't even try to hide it. Why would he? For years he had lived as though my death was a gift he deserved. The lawyer cleared his throat and began. He spoke of the prenuptial agreement, the one my godfather had insisted upon. My husband's face flickered for just a second annoyance at hearing the reminder, before he smoothed it back into confidence. Then came the words I had written, the words I had sharpened like arrows to pierce through every lie he had told. To my lawful husband I leave nothing. The room shifted. The silence that followed was thick, like a storm had sucked the air out of it. My husband's smug smile collapsed, his eyes darting from the lawyer to my godfather, searching for some loophole, some mistake. His mistress leaned forward, lips parting, as though she couldn't comprehend the script had changed. The lawyer continued. Everything I owned, every company share, every house, every bank account, had been placed in trust for my son. My child conceived through surrogacy, born of my will to defy death, was named sole heir with my godfather as guardian until he reached adulthood. Mara was designated as his second guardian should my godfather be unable to fulfill the duty. The plan was airtight. My husband's voice finally broke the silence. This is absurd, he snapped, his carefully crafted grief replaced with the rage I knew so well. We were married, I'm entitled. The lawyer raised a hand. You are entitled to nothing beyond what the prenuptial agreement permits. Your wife's will is valid and binding. Mara's eyes never left him. Her stare was not cruel, but steady, the way you look at someone you've already buried long before their time comes. My godfather leaned forward, voice low but cutting. She trusted me to protect what she built. You thought you could outweight her. You were wrong. I imagined his hands trembling, imagined the mistress shrinking back. Her face stripped of the smugness she had carried into the room. He would rage, demand, threaten. But there was nothing left to take. The inheritance he had waited for had slipped through his fingers like water, and he had no idea there was a child, my child, at the center of it all. The lawyer read the final lines, the ones I wrote for that moment. To those who betrayed me, know this: death does not silence the truth, it only makes it louder. He slammed his fist on the table. Then the sound cracking through the room. But it was a hollow sound, the sound of a man who had lost everything he thought was his. He stormed out, dragging his mistress behind him, but not before looking back at Mara and my godfather with eyes full of venom. I wondered if in that moment he realized the irony. The woman he had dismissed, ignored, and betrayed had beaten him even from the grave. Outside, people would whisper about the scandal, about how the grieving husband walked away empty-handed, while the fortune went to a child no one had seen yet. But inside that office, what remained was not scandal, it was justice. My justice, my revenge. For the first time, the story was no longer his to tell, it was mine. After the will was read, the world that my husband had so carefully built for himself began to crumble brick by brick. It wasn't instant karma, rarely is. It works slowly, deliberately, stripping away each layer until the person who once looked untouchable is left exposed and small. At first, he tried to fight it. He hired lawyers, demanded appeals, even accused my godfather and Mara of manipulating me when I was too sick to think clearly. But every attempt fell apart. The prenuptial agreement stood like a fortress, the will airtight. Judges looked at the evidence and saw what he never wanted them to: a pattern of neglect, betrayal, and greed. Each ruling was a hammer blow, chipping away at the illusion of control he had worn like armor. His mistress, once so radiant with the thrill of stolen promises, began to falter when she realized there was no fortune waiting to carry her into the life she had imagined. She wanted luxury, not lawsuits. She wanted jewels, not shame. Eventually, she slipped away from him, leaving only silence where her laughter had once been. Friends he thought were loyal began to distance themselves too. Without wealth to promise, without my reputation to lean on, he was just another man, angry, aging, and exposed. Invitations stopped arriving. Business partners who once flattered him avoided his calls. The social circles that had once admired him closed their doors. I sometimes imagined him in that empty house, the one we had shared, now echoing with nothing but his own footsteps. The rooms that once smelled of flowers he bought for appearances must have reeked of loneliness. I wondered if he stood at my side of the bed at night, staring at the cold sheets, realizing too late that he had traded something real for something hollow. That is karma, not always fire and fury, but silence, absence, the weight of your own choices pressing down until you can't breathe. Meanwhile, my son grew. Safe in Mara's arms, protected by my godfather's unwavering care, he became the living proof that I had not left this world empty-handed. His laugh filled the air with a joy I could only imagine, but I knew it was there. I pictured him learning to walk across Mara's living room, pictured my godfather clapping with tears in his eyes. Each milestone was a victory not just for him, but for me, a defiance against the man who thought he could erase me. And when the time came, he would learn the truth. He would hear my words, read my letters, and know that his mother did not leave quietly, that she fought until her last breath to protect him, to give him a life free from the poison of betrayal. He would grow up knowing that love was not about wealth or appearances, but about the people who show up when it matters. For my husband, every door closed. Every ally abandoned him until he was left only with the reflection of a man who had destroyed his own future. He became a ghost long before his time, wandering through the ruins of a life he thought was guaranteed. And I became more alive in death than I ever was in life, because my story carried on through my son, through the justice written in ink and sealed in law. If you are listening now, if you have followed me through this journey, know this betrayal may wound you, but it does not have to define you. Even when you are powerless in body, your spirit can still fight. Revenge is not always about fury. It is about reclaiming your voice, your dignity, your truth. I leave you with the lesson I carved from my pain. Never let anyone convince you that you are less than worthy of love, less than deserving of loyalty. If they try to strip you of your worth, build it again in silence, and one day, let the world see what they could not destroy. And to my son, if you hear this one day, know that I loved you beyond measure. You were my light in the darkest night, my reason to keep breathing when breathing hurt. Carry me with you not as a shadow, but as proof that love endures even when bodies fail. Live boldly, live kindly, and never ever let betrayal make you doubt who you are. If my story touched you, if it made you reflect on love, betrayal, and the strength it takes to rise again, please like this video, share it, so others may find strength too. Subscribe for more stories and leave me a comment with your thoughts. Your voice matters here.